Hi guys, I am here to argue one of the most debated songs in Taylor's whole discography. Question. And there are literally so many interpretations about who this song is about. I've seen theories it's about Harry Styles. I saw this one crazy theory like 3 years ago that it was about Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber, and I low-key fell for that. But after the Tortured Poets Department came out, many things were revealed about the feelings Taylor and Matty Healy shared for each other for over a decade. And maybe not an actual relationship, but there was definitely lingering feelings. At least enough for Taylor to be writing about him while she was in a relationship with Joe Alwyn, or at least so we thought, but maybe they had broken up already or been on a break at the time she was writing these songs. But we can get more into their relationship a little later. Today we're going to go through how the song Question is about Matty Healy by looking at the history and comparing it to other songs about Matty Healy. The most crucial thing to note is that Taylor and Matty Healy were involved back in 2014 when Taylor Swift was in her 1989 era. And looking back through the history, they fell off somewhere in between that time and soon after she started dating Calvin Harris. The first song here that we're going to look at that directly can tie back into Question is a song from the Tortured Poets Department, Peter. This song suggests that Taylor and Matty were involved, but something made it not work out, and Taylor always had a hope in her mind that her and Matty would eventually reunite. So to prove this, we're going to look at the bridge, which kind of encapsulates the whole point of the song, even though there is multiple points of the song that we can look at. So in the bridge, she states, "And I won't confess that I waited, but I let the lamp burn. As the men masqueraded, I hoped you'd return. With your feet on the ground, tell me all that you learned, because love's never lost when perspective is earned. And you said you'd come and get me, but you were 25, and the shelf life of those fantasies has expired. Lost to the Lost Boys chapter of your life." The first thing we're looking at here is that Matty Healy was about 25 when Taylor Swift was in her 1989 era, which would also make Taylor about 25 or so at the time. That's the first clue that we know that Peter is about Matty Healy. Matty Healy also described himself in 2016 as Peter Pan, as him being a youthful lost boy persona, and Taylor stating "Lost to the Lost Boys chapter of your life" is a direct reference to when Matty Healy was about 25 in 2014, and he wrote the song called Lost Boys. She explains this period of his life as the Lost Boys chapter of his life because in the time where they were heavily involved in each other's circles, this is around the time that song would have come out. The most important thing here also that we have to look at is that she said she waited, and what she is waiting for is him to essentially mature past maybe his drug addiction and his other childish behaviors, keeping them from being together, which we will get into later. But throughout the song, she also says, "I thought it was just goodbye for now." She says this multiple times, and she says, "You said you were going to grow up, and then you were going to come find me." And then in the beginning of the song, she says, "In closets like cedar, preserved from when we were just kids." So here she is referring to when they were 25. She's referring to them as being kids because this is about 10 years ago at the time she's writing this. And the memory in closets like cedar is something that she's holding on to as she's waited all this time for him to come back into her life. But eventually, as she says at the end, promises oceans deep, but never to keep, which implies that Matty never fully matured to let them be together in the way she wanted all those years ago. So we've already established that Peter is about Matty Healy, so now we have to look at another song which directly ties into the point I'm trying to make, which is Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. This is the most important song that directly ties into Question, but first I had to talk about Peter so we can go into how Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus is about Matty as well, and how the song directly correlates to Question. The song starts off with the words, "Your hologram stumbled into my apartment. Hands in the hair of somebody in darkness named Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, and I just watched it happen. As the decade would play us for fools, and you saw my bones out with somebody new who seemed like he would have bullied you in school, and you just watched it happen." The first thing we need to look at here is how she describes as the decade would play us for fools, and see how that ties right back into the analysis of Peter. So we've already established that he was 25 when they first got involved with each other, and when they reunited during the Midnights era in the Eras tour, they were about 33, 34, which is about a decade since they last saw each other. She then goes on to say, "You saw me with somebody new who seemed like he would have bullied you in school, and you just watched it happen," which essentially means that, as we said before, Quickly after Maddie and Taylor stopped seeing each other is when she got with Calvin Harris. And Maddie, assuming from these lyrics, kind of let her go or didn't fight for her when she saw her with Calvin Harris. As she says, you just watched it happen. So essentially, Maddie Healy just kind of accepted that they weren't meant to be and just kind of like watched her falafel around with Calvin Harris and basically just accepted that she'd moved on. And from here, we can assume that Calvin Harris is the person that seemed like he would have bullied Maddie Healy in school. Okay, now let's get into the main reason why they didn't work out. One of the main reasons, allegedly, is that he had a drug problem. As she states in Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, you needed me, but you needed drugs more, and I couldn't watch it happen. I changed into goddesses, villains, and fools, changed plans and outfits and lovers and rules, all to outrun my desertion of you, and you just watched it. So when we look at this, the reason why they broke up, we could assume was his drug problem or just Maddie's overall behavior in 2014. Also here, again, she's kind of referencing the same thing she was talking about in Peter. She's basically saying how she waited and this was her buying time or coping or just trying to kind of move on. As she says in Peter, I won't confess that I waited, but I let the lamp burn. As the men masqueraded, I hoped you'd return. So basically, she was waiting, but not waiting. She was entertaining other guys, but secretly hoping that Maddie would come back. And there are so many songs where she is describing this feeling of wishing she had a past lover. And songs like Even the One and songs like Cardigan. She also mentions in the song when she says, back to the moment I crashed into you, like so many wrecks do, too impaired by my youth to know what to do, which ties directly back into the fact that she considered herself young when they were falling in love, as she said in Peter, preserved from when we were just kids. And just like in many of Taylor's songs that center around Maddie, the central theme of the song is she will always wonder what could have happened, as she ends the song saying, I'll always wonder. Finally, let's get into the main point of this video that ties it all together and clears up all the confusion about Question. So I already explained that Taylor and Maddie were connected when Taylor was in New York. She was in her 1989 era. She was 25. She was having all the parties. She had her girl squad. And as we know, she begins this song saying, good girl, sad boy, big city, wrong choices. We had one thing going on. I swear that it was something, because I don't remember who I was before you painted all my nights, a color I've searched for since. Okay, here we have to highlight. They were in a big city, and she was a good girl. He was a sad boy. She was basically describing how she was wanting to stay away from all the drugs and all the bad things that Maddie Healy was kind of getting himself into, and that he was the sad boy who was on drugs and doing things that she didn't agree with. But she does say that he painted her nights a color she searched for ever since, which ties back into Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus and Peter when she says she was essentially settling for all these other guys while longing for the feelings that Maddie Healy gave her. So from all that, we can assume that the chorus of Question is describing situations that Maddie and Taylor probably had together and things that they experienced. But the most important lyric we can take from this chorus is about Maddie and Taylor, and when she says, do you wish you put up more of a fight? Which ties right back into Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus when Taylor explains you just watched it happen. And then in Peter, when she basically says you didn't keep your promise, so he did not put up a fight to keep her, which is explained in Question when she's basically saying that he lost her, and she's basically asking in the song, do you wish you tried harder? She later says, did you realize at a time she was on your mind with some dickhead guy that you saw that night, but you were on something? So this directly ties back into Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus when she said you were with some guy that would have bullied you in school and you just watched it happen. And here she's basically saying he was on something, so he basically let it go. So that's kind of telling you that both of these songs, she's talking about Calvin Harris, and that Calvin Harris was kind of like the signaling of the end of their relationship. And she ties this verse up by saying that it got swept away in the gray and she'd like to have a conversation. Basically saying that they kind of just fell out, and the dickhead guy and the guy that would have bullied you in school comment was probably because Calvin Harris is probably the more rough type, and Maddie Healy was more like the nerdy musical type, and I think that's the correlation she's trying to make here. And the mention of Calvin Harris is a dead giveaway that these songs are about the same situation. And basically in this whole song, she's talking about how miscommunication and misunderstandings was the reason that they ended up falling off. She's basically just wondering like where it all went wrong and asking him like, does he remember and regret it in the same way that she does? So knowing all this, you can assume that all these songs are about Maddie Healy and not Harry Styles. And honestly, just go listen to all these 3 songs and like you'll put the pieces together. Even more of her songs in her discography are about Maddie Healy, and you just find more parallels the more and more you listen, especially between Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. And Question. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this convinced you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, please.